Hi, in this episode of Redneck 101, we're giving a fishing overview of Flat Creek in Lake Lanier. And I first started focusing my efforts on Flat Creek a couple of years ago after many years of frustration fishing Lake Lanier. Lake Lanier is, without a doubt, the hardest lake I've ever learned to fish.
There is a Redeemer, Jesus, God's own Son, precious Lamb of God, Messiah, Holy One.
And one of the mistakes I was making early on is I would always chase the latest fishing reports. You know, running up to the north end, running down by the dam, wherever the hot report was, trying to figure it out. And I finally decided, let's just focus on one part of Lake Lanier, develop some skill, learn it. And the reason I picked Flat Creek was it's not too far from my house. You know, I don't have a big fishing budget. And my biggest annual fishing expense is actually towing the boat around. Because it's a small aluminum boat and it's real easy on the gas itself, but you know, the tow vehicle, most tow vehicles, by the time you do the math, you're paying between 50 cents and $1 a mile to tow the boat once you really include all the expenses involved with owning that tow vehicle. So I picked Flat Creek because it wasn't too far of a drive, and I studied the contour maps. And one of the things I learned when I was studying the contour maps is I like to troll, and I learned some precision trolling techniques from a Lake Erie charter boat captain years ago that I've implemented very well in just about any body of water that's relatively clear, that's deep enough, and that has schools of bait out in the middle so the fish chase the bait. So I studied the contour maps, and I figured I could troll from here all the way up Flat Creek, make a loop, go back. And I like a long trolling area, because what I've learned is that as you troll back and forth, eventually you'll be marking more bait in one of the areas. And then, you know, if you're marking more bait up here, you can make smaller circles here. If you're marking more bait here, you make smaller circles here, whatever it may be. And so I like the contours on the Flat Creek area of Lake Lanier, because there's a lot of places where you can follow a contour relatively easily. Because another thing about trolling is sometimes the bait or the fish, they might want to all be 20 feet down over a 60-foot bottom, and it's pretty easy to follow, you know, keep it between 50 and 60 feet in the contour that you're following when you're trolling. Another thing I like about Flat Creek, and one of the reasons I picked it, was it drains a large area. And let me go ahead and show you that here. It drains this whole region of Gainesville, right? We think about Flat Creek as a part of Lake Lanier, this bit here, but the creek that flows into it actually drains an awful lot of Gainesville, so it's very fertile. It also has a treatment plant on the creek, so there's nitrogen and phosphorus being released into the creek, which increases the fertility of that area of the lake. And once you have higher fertility, you have some advantages. Mainly, you know, the nitrogen and the phosphorus stimulate growth of phytoplankton, and the phytoplankton in turn get eaten by the zooplankton, and then the zooplankton gets eaten by the bait. The bait's happy, you have lots of bait, and then you have lots of the predator fish eating the bait. So I knew that would be true for Flat Creek. That's also true of Ballast Creek. Ballast Creek drains a large area, so you can actually find, the EPA publishes maps of chlorophyll A concentrations, and the concentrations of chlorophyll A, which is really an indicator of how much phytoplankton you have, are pretty high. On the south end of the lake, the Flat Creek area and the 6 Mile Creek area have the highest levels of phytoplankton, chlorophyll A, and the 6 Mile Creek is just a much larger drive, longer drive for me. Although, you know, if you like the ideas that I'm posting about Flat Creek, 6 Mile Creek is sort of a twin to Flat Creek on the north side. So a lot of the things I've learned about Flat Creek apply equally well to 6 Mile Creek once you study it. Alright, so let's talk about the seasonality of it. You know, when the water starts to warm up in the spring, the first thing that turns on in Flat Creek is what I call the creek backs, or these shallower areas up here. And this area is about goes from about 25 feet deep to about 15 deep quickly as you enter the creek back. And what happens is that the warming water and maybe a full moon, it stimulates the different bait fish to run up that creek and spawn. Now I know blueback herring don't all run back into creek backs to spawn, but gizzard shad have a strong impulse to run into the creek back to spawn, and then some number of blueback herring will run up into the creek and spawn too. And when that happens in April and May, an awful lot of predators chase the bait back there. So you've got bigger stripers, you've got flathead catfish, you've got a lot of channel catfish, and a moderate amount of spotted bass chasing the bait up in the creek. So we've really had a lot of good days fishing in April and May in this creek back here. Now what happens as the water warms in May, once the surface temperature gets up to about, between 75 and 80 degrees somewhere, but really what's happening is that the thermocline is getting deeper and deeper. And so once the thermocline reaches the bottom of the creek, right, say 12 feet or so, the bluebacks don't want to be above the thermocline anymore at that point. So most of the bait at that point runs out of the creek back and into the deeper water. And it's like God hits an off switch for the fishing in that creek back until the water begins to cool in September. So once that happens, our focus is out in the deeper areas, and then we switch from fishing with bait, which is what we're doing mostly in the creek back, running jugs, that kind of thing. We switch to trolling, at that point in May, and different things happen that influence the trolling world in Flat Creek. And we've stopped trolling this area here because we so seldom catch any fish trolling in this area here. Although it looks like it should be good. Sometimes we mark bait out here, but we haven't caught many fish out here. So our habit now is to make this turn from Flat Creek into Ballast Creek, or just to turn around here, or to go down this dead end rather than going down this way and turn around somewhere in here. We stopped trolling this area because we don't catch any fish. So the things that affect the trolling most strongly in May, June, and July, and most of the fish we catch trolling in May through July in these areas are spotted bass, and we catch them on either Michigan Stinger spoons trolled on lead core behind dipsy divers, so we can get them 10, 20, 30 feet down. Wherever we're marking the bait, the game with trolling is to keep those lures, to pull them through the big balls of bait. And the spotted bass fishing can be very good, and here's why. There's a lot of bass tournaments that meet at the Ballast Creek boat ramp. And when all those bass get weighed in and released, they hang around Ballast Creek for a little while, so sometimes this is actually the better area for spotted bass. But when they get to this point, the spotted bass need to decide, am I going to head out toward the main lake, or am I going to head up Flat Creek? And at that point in the summer, there's more bait in this area of Flat Creek than there is in this area of Flat Creek, so the spotted bass tend to head up Flat Creek. And then it's like every tournament stocks hundreds of decent sized 2 pounds and up spotted bass back into the Ballast Creek and the Flat Creek areas. And then there'll be some striper mixed in as well. If you want more spotted bass on the troll, we troll small X-Wraps, small crankbaits, and small Michigan Stinger spoons. If you're thinking more about striped bass on the troll, we troll Captain Max chipmunk jigs with the yellow or chartreuse twisty tail, and we troll larger Michigan Stinger spoons. and that works pretty well in the summer, although, like I said before, May, June, and July, we're thinking more about spotted bass simply because that's what we catch more of. We think the populations of spotted bass are higher. Now what happens as the water begins to cool in September is the striped bass that have been down by the dam and in the deeper water and in the main channel, they start headed back up north in the lake. And because of this, the phytoplankton that I talked about, there's a lot of bait that moves into Flat Creek in the fall, September, October. So then we switch a little more heavily on the troll. We're more into the chipmunk jigs and the larger Michigan stinger spoons. And you can mark them and you can see where all the bait is on the sonar. And what happens by September, they're either kind of in this area of Ballast Creek here, or they start to pull up in this area here in the upper region of Flat Creek. And just for give you some bearings here, the FC8 channel marker is here, the FC9 channel marker is here, that's the last channel marker. There's a blue boathouse right here, there's another little boathouse right here. And the guys who troll with blueback herring at about a half mile an hour with their trolling motors, they make tiny little circles in here. Now I'm trolling lures that might be 100, 200, sometimes as far as 300 feet back. So I can't make those tiny circles. So I'll make the bigger loop in here and just try and keep my lure spending as much time as possible in the strike zone. Now this narrows here is also an interesting feature that I wouldn't just always ride over this on plane headed for up here. A lot of times this is a natural pinch point. So a lot of times the place that you'll pick up stripers is here, and there are days when the bait and the stripers are right here in this narrows, and so I will start here, go through the narrows, turn around, go back through the narrows, turn around, go back through the narrows, and just keep trying to pull the lures through this narrow spot as many times as possible. The other place that fish can be stacked up, or that we often catch fish when you're trolling by, there's a sharp turn. It's a hairpin turn, more than 90 degrees, kind of an acute angle in there, right here in the creek channel. Now you have to be careful because this is a shallow bank, and the spotted bass fishermen love fishing this shallow point that extends all the way out from this side. Now trolling lures that are 20 or 30 feet down, I need to keep them in the creek channel, so I need to follow it that way a little more closely. But we catch a lot of fish between here and here, just in various months of the year, summer and fall, because for whatever reason, the bait stacks up in here and the predators stack up in here as well. So Flat Creek's been very good to us for a number of years now. One thing that I will mention, there's that treatment plant up the creek a little bit. In October 2020, there was a hurricane, there was a lot of rain, and there was a little bit of a sewage spill that ended up coming into Flat Creek. That sewage spill messed up the fishing from about the time it happened in October 2020, and to my estimation, it still really hasn't recovered. Flat Creek, fall 2020 wasn't that good. Flat Creek in the spring of 2021, it's been kind of hit and miss. You know, we've had some good days, flathead catfish, big stripers, or lots of channel catfish. But then we've had more days in 2021 that have been just kind of blah fishing in the creek back. And I think it's a residual effect of that sewage spill, or maybe some chemicals that washed downstream along with it in 2020. But I expect once the bait gets going here, the phytoplankton is happening again this year. I expect Flat Creek is going to come back strong in the summer and fall of 2021.
They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They Lord, to wait. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Teach me, Lord, teach me, Lord, to wait. I tremble at the thought of Judgment Day. Lord, I am not ready. Please don't return just yet, for all my sins are put away. My cross is on the floor and I would burn.